Good morning, and welcome to Calvary Covenant Church Online. My name is Kendall Churchill, and as always, it is so good to be with you today. This past week, I've been talking with people on the phone, looking online, and one thing that seems to come up continually is that people aren't very happy. In fact, people seem to be rather anxious and frustrated, whether they think that the stay-at-home order or these restrictions and all that's going on with the pandemic, or just hearing about the pandemic again, is just making them go crazy. Ultimately, I think a lot of what I've been sensing lately is that people are really anxious. And so I wanted to look at that today. And so I'd like to have us start by looking at the 7 ominous signs that anxiety might be controlling you. The first ominous sign is that you are drawn to drama. You know, with things like clickbait titles. Those things in magazines or online that say the 9 fashion trends that will get you in trouble, or these 11 dangerous foods that'll kill you, or these 7 ominous signs that anxiety is controlling you. You know, things that are pretty catchy. We're drawn to these things. They focus on the uncertain, and they make us feel, oh no, what am I supposed to do? And that's what anxiety is. It's this sense of uncertainty, feeling unequipped to face the future. The second ominous sign is that you are more reactive and less proactive. There's different kind of levels in the brain. You have thinking, feeling, reacting. And reacting is like a reptile level brain. Cats and dogs are able to do feeling, and then humans are able to do thinking. When we become anxious, we're not able to think. Instead, we regress either into just feeling or into reacting. And so we move into survival mode instead. Third ominous sign is that moving forward feels impossible. You just feel stuck. You feel paralyzed and overwhelmed. And when you feel that way, you look for other people that are feeling that same way. I don't know what to do. Do you? No? And I mean, misery likes company after all. And when we feel overwhelmed, we're really easily manipulated. I mean, just look at the rise of the 24-hour news feed. It feeds our anxiety. Or our political climate. It feeds off of our anxieties. The fourth ominous sign is that being antagonistic has become second nature to you. I mean, have you noticed that you're less sugar and spice and more spit and vinegar these days? Are you constantly reacting out of either fear or rebellion? Anxiety comes out in all sorts of different ways, but ultimately it's a lack of patience and kindness, love and mercy. The fifth ominous sign is that you have discovered conspiracy theories and that they are the source of truth. Conspiracy theories, they help people feel like insiders, that they have control and knowledge, and that all those experts, what do they know? I know the real truth. And it's a coping mechanism to create an alternate reality that prescribes the worst to others. I mean, did we really land on the moon? In Area 51, I hear there's little green men. If you wear a tinfoil hat, it'll keep the government out from reading your brain waves. The sixth ominous sign is that you try to do everything yourself and only your way is right. Have you ever noticed that everyone is useless, that they can't help and they do everything wrong? That you have to control everything in order to be done right? I mean, the only thing worse than no help is bad help. Whether it's folding clothes or organizing or cleaning, you have to do it yourself to make sure it gets done right. And the seventh ominous sign that anxiety is controlling you is that you have become the master of distraction. You're kind of like this grandmaster ninja, warrior, assassin, like the ultimate person at distraction, whether it's watching television, social media, looking at your phone, reading a book, playing a game, taking a nap, whatever it might be that draws you away. You have just become so easily distracted, not doing the things you're supposed to do. I mean, how many times have you been late or incomplete or done a really poor job due to procrastination? If any of these descriptions fit you, you probably have anxiety controlling your life. Now, each week I ask people to comment below about on something. And this week, I want you to comment below if you have any of these ominous signs. Again, to quickly name them, you are drawn to drama. You are more reactive and less proactive. You feel frozen. You're being antagonistic. You're into conspiracy theories. You do everything yourself, and that you are have mastered the art of distraction. All of these things are about anxiety. And I know some of you are thinking, I don't struggle with anxiety. And some of you are thinking, I don't struggle with anxiety. It comes really easily to me. At the end of the day, I think we all are very familiar with anxiety. It's part of life, both in the small but also in the ongoing ways. And we all know it. We all experience it. You'd think at this point we'd be really good at handling it. But so often, we handle it poorly. We let it control us. Our world has chronic anxiety, and the last couple months has really aggravated it. It's gotten a lot worse. But the good news that we have is that anxiety doesn't need to rule over us. Instead, we have a way to live faithfully, to live fully. And it's the Bible that tells us that we can have peace in an anxious world by turning to God. Our scripture that I want us to look at today is in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. Paul writes, saying, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." Now, when Paul was writing this, he was writing to the people of Philippi, which was a Roman settlement where they would have guards, these sentries, maintaining their watch. And that would be a very familiar sight. And Paul says, the peace of God will guard your hearts and minds, much like those sentry soldiers. And God will protect you as you live prayerfully and gracefully on the dependence of God. Now, he says, when you are anxious about anything, and anything here is like, those really big things in life? You don't have to be anxious about that. What about those really small things? Don't have to be anxious about those either. Whether big or small or in between, all of our anxieties, we are to present it to God. Our prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present everything to Him. And when we do this, we do it with joy because we remember that, all those other problems in life, God helped me through those as well. And God is still with me. And even if I haven't seen Him before or can think of it at the moment, God has shown up in the lives of other people I know, my friends and family, and the stories of Scripture. God cares. He's big enough. He's strong enough, and He cares enough. Okay, God can handle this. I don't have to do this by myself. Now, when it says present everything to God, it doesn't say that He will snap His fingers and all of your problems that cause the anxiety will go away. No, it says that He will give you the peace of God, which passes all understanding. And this peace, if you've ever experienced it before, it's this wave that washes over, that it removes any doubt or fear, and it just says it's going to be all right. Not that the problem is solved, but you're going to make it through. That this is not the end of the story, that there's a bigger picture. You're not alone. And this peace that God gives, it's the peace of God that passes all understanding. It's not the peace of cod, by the way, that passes all understanding. That's lutefisk. But the peace of God that passes all understanding, it guards our hearts and minds. It's what God promises is less about changing our outward condition, which He does sometimes do, but the peace of God focuses on our inward state. It guards our hearts and minds. It's not letting outside forces control us, not letting our internal fears control us. And at the end of the day, we are not our own. We ultimately serve a master. We get to choose, though. That's good news. You can choose who you will serve. Will you serve the God you can know, or will you serve the unknown future? What will have the controlling power over how you will live? One of the things that I've thought about recently is for little kids. When they get scared, whether they're playing and they fall down or they're wandering about, sometimes kids, they get anxious and scared, and so they start looking around. Where's mom? Where's dad? Where's a big brother or sister? Where's the authority figure who can keep them safe? And if they can find them, okay, it's going to be all right. They maybe go over, give them a hug, and then go back to playing. They check in. But if they aren't there, if the child doesn't see them, even if the adult's there and they just don't see them, the kid, they get scared. They get anxious. They don't know what to do. They start crying. They feel overwhelmed. How are they supposed to live without the adult nearby? If the adult's nearby, they can live boldly. And please understand, the child isn't then supposed to go, oh, mom and dad's right there. I guess I can go play in the street. Or mom and dad said I shouldn't go play with that the chainsaw, but I'm just going to do it anyway. No, the child still needs to live wisely and listen to the parents' orders. But the child who sees their parents are comforted. And even though their anxieties are relieved in that moment, the child still needs to check in regularly. It's not like the peace is there forever. They forget. And how often do we forget? How often do we get anxious? Even if we prayed to God this morning, prayed to God yesterday, last week, and gave our anxieties over to Him, each new day has its own challenges and problems. We need to continually bring them before. We need to continually check in. And when we free ourselves of anxiety through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, presenting everything to God, our hearts and minds are relieved. We don't have to carry that burden anymore. But if we don't do that, if we hold on to it, we try to cope with it ourselves, well, then we end up like Saul in the Old Testament. Saul, the first king of Israel. If you want to read more of his story, you can look in the book of 1 Samuel. And Saul is a man whose life is marked by chronic, constant anxiety. I mean, when he is anointed and told that he's going to be the king, they're going to crown him, and he goes and hides, trying to get away. When he goes into battle, he doesn't follow God's commands out of fear of what his soldiers will think. When there's a sacrifice to be made, he gets impatient and does it himself. He does it improperly because he's scared of how his soldiers will react. He gets scared when he sees the Philistine Goliath. He gets jealous of how the people are affectionate towards David. He gets fearful that David is going to try to rule over him and kill him. He gets fearful and God's Spirit leaves him. And Saul, he's just a tragic individual. All of these problems overwhelm him. God chose him to be his faithful ruler, but Saul didn't rely on God. So many people in this world live tragic lives, filled with anxiety, because they haven't turned it over to God. But for those who do, if you want to turn over your anxiety to God, to have the peace of God that passes all understanding, to guard your hearts and minds, it's going to change not just how you feel, but then how you live as well. In the book of Romans, chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, it says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, perfect, and pleasing will." We have a choice. in how we will see this world, how we will see our predicaments and problems. We have different glasses, you could say. And like you can wear big funky glasses or sunglasses or rose tinted. There's all sorts of different glasses we can wear in life, and we get a choice in how we will see this world as well. And what I have seen during this pandemic is that people wear political glasses or economic lenses. They wear social goggles or geographical sheets of glass. They look through these different ways of our world, but they don't look through a spiritual one. They don't see with heaven's eyes. So often we look through these different ways, and you can then argue or get frustrated about why aren't people acting this way, or why are they doing these certain things? But the lens we use matters so much. It affects our hearts and minds, how we focus and interpret and react. God's peace transforms how we will both react and how we will find peace. And I gotta confess, it's been really disheartening. It's been really sad to see so many Christians not using a biblical lens, not looking through God's glasses. Instead, they've been looking through all sorts of different lenses instead. Right now, the world is really anxious. And it notices that we're anxious too. It notices when we blame instead of loving. If we talk all this time about being God's hands and feet and being light and salt and loving the world, but then we don't act any differently, we lose our witness. One particular way our superintendent, Mark Stromberg, mentioned recently is that please resist the impulse to read into our present circumstances any conspiracy interpretation. At this time, it is important to discipline our thinking and to not ascribe malicious intent to any action or perspective with which we disagree. Please seek to give others the benefit of the doubt. Anxiety, it reacts in fear, overconfidence, anger, scapegoating, conspiracy theories. It demands either or, black and white thinking. It loses nuances and demands certainty. Which of these anxiety markers have you experienced recently? I'm going to read those again for you. Anxiety reacts in fear, overconfidence, anger, scapegoating, conspiracy theories. It demands either or, black and white thinking, loses nuance, and has a need for certainty. What are you anxious about today? Maybe right now you're not feeling very anxious, so it may be not today, but what are you anxious about regularly? What consistently makes you anxious? Whatever is causing you anxiety, in whatever situation, for whatever reason, when we aren't able to think as clearly and maybe move into just feeling or into reacting, I have a very simple prayer for you. It's not complicated. It's something you don't have to spend much time to learn. It is simply this: not my will, Lord, but yours. Help me, God. I turn this over to you. Not my will, Lord, but yours. Help me, God. I turn this over to you. One author, Deepak Chopra, said the best use of imagination is creativity. And the worst use of imagination is anxiety. We can use our imagination. We can use what God has given to us for good. We can use it for innovation and problem solving and fun and whimsy. Or we can use it for doomsday forecasting, or looking to see if the sky is falling, or just being a party pooper. We have a choice in how we will react. We can either spread anxiety, or we can help prevent it. And we can do that by being a non-anxious presence. By that, I mean we focus on our own anxiety. We're not trying to control or solve the problem. We just focus on managing ourselves, checking our own pulse, because the only person you can control is yourself. But when you do that, it has a powerful effect. Again, think of a child. If it falls over, if the parent comes over and goes, "Oh no, what's wrong?" The kid, they go, "Oh no, something's terrible. I better cry and be upset too." But if the child falls over and the parent goes, "Hey, you're going to be okay. Get up." The kid goes, "Oh, okay, I guess I'm all right." The same sort of idea. If you are anxious, it builds more anxiety. But if you are non-anxious, it lowers the anxiety for others. And anxiety, it comes out in all different times and situations due to change and loss, which are just parts of life. And when it happens, it tries to widen the chasm between us and them. But the grace and peace of God seeks out love for our neighbor, and it invites them in. It doesn't push and divide. It invites and draws them closer and says, we're in it together. It's going to be okay because we have God to help us through this. Friends, we can be witnesses not just in how we act, but in how we react. A couple weeks ago, I ended with a prayer called the Serenity Prayer, which just simply says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And this past week, as I was thinking about anxiety, I came across an updated version of that prayer that I would like to close with today, that I think just kind of summarizes all this really well. God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, which is pretty much everyone, since I'm clearly not you, God. At least not the last time I checked. And while you're at it, God, please give me the courage to change what I need to change about myself, which is frankly a lot, since, once again, I'm not you, which means I'm not perfect. It's better for me to focus on changing myself than to worry about changing other people, who, as you'll no doubt remember me saying, I can't change anyway. Finally, give me the wisdom to just shut up whenever I think I'm clearly smarter than everyone else in the room, that no one knows what they're talking about except me, or that I have all the answers. Basically, God, grant me the wisdom to remember that I'm not you. Friends, go in God's peace. Amen.